Good. Welcome back to all of you, and welcome to all of the online students who are watching this stream live, our satsang. I'm glad you could join us. We did this for the first time last week, and we're still trying to figure it out. I'll talk a little bit more about that at the end of the class. Let me just check. I'm not getting any numbers there. Okay. I'm looking at the monitor here, just seeing if there's anything we need to do. But I think it's working okay. We'll just let it be and see what happens. Again, welcome to you all. I have to apologize because last week there were so many questions and we could only cover a few of them. Hopefully we'll be able to cover a few more in today's class. I'll try to keep things a little bit shorter. We have questions both from our local students and then online students. We're getting your questions by email. And I want to remind you, if you want to submit a question for this satsang, please email it to me. SwamiT at arshabodha.org. You'll find that email address in the description below the video. Also, let me mention that if you did send a question last week, I don't have them anymore. So please, if you have a question from last week, please resend it. And I don't want to take last week's questions because the questioners may or may not be present online, so we'll take a new batch of questions today. Okay? And now everything seems to be working well. So let us begin. Sorry for these distractions. Our first question today is from Jose. I'm not sure where he lives, but he asks a really good question. He says, if there is no first life, how can there be a last one? Excuse me. This is quite a good question. According to the doctrine of karma, you have had an infinite number of prior lives. The doctrine of karma only works if you have had an infinite number of prior lives with no first birth. There can be no first birth according to the doctrine of karma, because if there were a first birth, there would be no karma to bring about your birth. So, according to the doctrine of karma, you have had an infinite number of previous births. So, given that fact, logically speaking, if there have been an infinite number of previous births, there was no first birth, how can there be a last birth? This is it's a good question. It's often asked. And also, let me share this. He goes on to say, should we call it a miracle of miracles and leave it at that? Which means, he doesn't use this language, but let me supply it. It's illogical. It looks illogical that you have had an infinite number of prior births. How can there be a last birth? It looks illogical. And then he says, is there an answer that's compatible with logic? And that's what we need to discuss here and now. All the scriptures describe the consequence of enlightenment, liberation, moksha, as being free from rebirth. How does that work? And it's especially tricky because in Shankara's view, not all schools of Vedanta, I should mention that in Vishishta, Dvaita, and Dvaita and other Vedantic traditions, they have different responses to this particular question. But in Shankara's Advaita, Shankara says very clearly, Jnanam eva moksha. Moksha is knowledge of your true nature, the personal discovery of your true nature as Satchidananda Atma, utterly non-different from Brahman, the reality because of which everything exists. So and here's the tricky point, and this is a little subtle, but I think you get it. Knowledge destroys ignorance. Ignorance is the source of suffering. You get that. And this is our fundamental principles of Advaita Vedanta. The spiritual wisdom, Atma Jnanam, knowledge of your true self, destroys the ignorance that is the cause for suffering in this lifetime. Good. Knowledge destroys ignorance. Does knowledge destroy karma? Uh-oh. This is a huge problem. And most people kind of don't pay attention to it. I think we should pay attention to it. And Jose is asking this important question. So knowledge doesn't destroy karma. Remember, karma is like a pending effect. Karma phala, we use all these shorthands. Karma means adrishta karma phala, a result which is waiting to fructify. If I were to let go of this bottle and if it were to remain suspended in the air, that would represent karma phala, this adrishta karma phala, what we loosely call karma. So if this was just suspended here in the air, how to fructify the result? My action was to let go of the bottle, and the result, of course, is law of gravity to bring it down. So that is the fructification. So the phala is removed through fructification. The pending karma is removed by exhausting it. What kind of knowledge, just for fun, if this were suspended here, what kind of knowledge would allow it to remain suspended here or remove it altogether? Huh? That's absurd. And that shows the absurdity of the position that knowledge destroys karma. It can't. Then, what is the basis for all of our scriptures saying that all of your karmas, Shri Krishna himself says that bhasmasat, all of your karmas are reduced to ashes, so to speak, in jnana agni, in this fire of knowledge. This is a metaphor. The fire of knowledge cannot burn karma. The fire of knowledge burns ignorance. But then, suppose this fire of knowledge destroys a particular kind of ignorance, the ignorance that allows you to be the agent of action. Now, this is going to be this is just a little complex, not that complex. You'll get it. Here's how it works. Karma phala belongs to the agent of action. So all the karmas that cause you to get born again and again and again, who owns those karmas? If you understand Vedanta well enough, you understand that Atma does not possess all those karmas. Atma is asanga. It is utterly beyond all those karmas. So those karmas belong to whoever committed the deeds. Karmas belong to the karma karta, the agent of action. So all of your karmas belong not to Atma, but to the one who did the karmas. Who is the one who does karma? Is that, we call it ego, ahankara, that little being, as it were, inside your head that said, I did it. Whoever says, I did that karma, that one owns the results. That make sense? Sure. So whoever says, I did it, does Atma say, I did it? Your mind says, I did it. Your mind and body together are engaged in actions. I should say, your mind through the faculties of sight, hearing, smell, taste, touch, your mind, through the faculties of controlling your body, your mind is engaged in all of these activities. The karta, the agent of action, who committed all the actions, the agent of action who possesses all the pending results, who possesses all that karma, that agent is associated with your mind, with your sukshma sharira that travels, your subtle body that travels from one life to the next. So, karma belongs not to Atma, karma belongs to the mind, to the sukshma sharira in general, and specifically, karma belongs to the one who says, I did it. That term, I did it, can be expressed more technically as ahankara, the sense of individuality, the sense of doership, which is an important and central principle in our mind. And that ahankara arises due to ignorance. Your mind is just a thing. Is your mind a conscious being, or are you the conscious being? Your mind, especially according to Shankara and the ancients, your mind is jada. It's made of subtle elements. It's not a conscious thing. Consciousness, which is your true nature, illumines the mind, empowers the mind to function, but the mind in and of itself doesn't do anything on its own. Now, look at the conundrum here. The mind in and of itself is jada, incapable of action, yet this thought arises in the mind, I did it. Hey, that's a problem. The mind can't do anything in the absence of consciousness. It's like a light bulb won't turn on in the absence of electricity. Your mind can't do anything in the absence of consciousness. So, your mind, I just lost my train of thought. Where did it go? What an expression, train of thought. Okay, sorry. Your mind can't do anything. It is jada. Yet in your mind arises this thought, I did it. That thought is due to ignorance. That thought is the agent of action, the one who says, I did it. That thought is the agent of action. That thought, in association with the sukshma sharira, is the possessor of that accumulation of karma that causes you to get born again and again and again. Your ownership of karma is due to the ahankara, the ego, the sense of doership, and that ego is a product of ignorance for all the reasons we've just described. Watch this. Suppose that fire of knowledge, we admit, it can't destroy karma, it can destroy ignorance. So if that knowledge, fire of knowledge, destroys ignorance, and the ahankara, which exists because of ignorance, is like the house of cards. You pull out the card at the bottom, the whole thing comes crashing down. Same thing, you remove ignorance, and the ahankara, the agency, the ownership of the karma gets removed. It comes crashing down. That whole paradigm of action and result comes crashing down at the moment of enlightenment, like when you remove that card. Now, what that means then is enlightenment cannot remove karma. Enlightenment removes doership, ahankara, and when that doership is removed, ownership of karma is removed because the karma belongs to the karta. Remove the agent, there's no one home, so to speak, to own that karma. So at the death of your physical body, since there's no one, all that karma is still there, but no one owns it. What to do? I've given this metaphor before. This is a little abstract, I admit, but here's a very simple way of understanding it. Take a multi-billionaire, one of these like Elon Musk or Bill Gates. Suppose they have a huge bank account. That huge bank account represents your sanchita karma, so much accumulated karma. Suppose Bill Gates wants to give away all his money. By the way, he has a charitable fund. He is giving away a lot of money, lots, which is wonderful. So suppose Bill Gates starts writing out checks for $1,000. Every day he writes out a check for $1,000 and sends it to someone, $1,000, $1,000, $1,000. How long will it take for him to exhaust his billions of dollars in the bank? You work out the numbers, it's probably hundreds of years it would take him writing out checks for $1,000. So how would Bill Gates possibly get rid of all of that money, give it all away? Remember that all his money represents all your sanchita karma. Well, when Bill Gates dies, and I pray for his long life, but when he dies, the tricky question, when he dies, what happens to his money? Nothing. It's still there, right? When he dies, the money doesn't die. The money exists, but he no longer possesses it, right? When he dies, possession of the money goes away. Not the money. In the same way, when an enlightened person dies, not that the karma gets destroyed, there's no ownership of the karma. And of course, if there's no ownership of the karma, then those karma phalas themselves don't have an independent existence. They can't exist without a doer, without an owner. So I hope this explains this very tricky question, Jose's question and the question of many others. And the answer is, even though knowledge can't destroy karma, knowledge, meaning enlightenment, removes your ownership of that infinite amount of sanchita karma, and in this way, no rebirth. Okay. This is a question from Rishi Ganesh. Does he give a location? No location. So, his question from Rishi Ganesh, he says, I know for certain that I am consciousness. Good. I am the stage in which these events, including the events of this body and mind, are taking place. Excellent. Good. Yet, I still feel limited. I like this question. I still don't feel infinite. I don't feel limitless. Though the stage itself, which is consciousness is limitless, the events are limitless. And since I am also the events, because the events are also consciousness, I feel limited. The language is a little confusing, but I think you get the sense. I feel like I'm overlooking something crucial here, feeling stuck. Okay, this is another excellent question. By the way, I've been really impressed with the questions that have been coming, and quite a few questions have come already. So let's keep going. you recognize, as Rishi Ganesh has recognized, I am consciousness. Consciousness is limitless, so why don't I feel limitless? Good question, right? Notice, I am consciousness. Consciousness is limitless. Why don't I feel limitless? And it's subtle, but we can figure this out. When you say, I am consciousness, and say, I don't feel limitless, those are two different I's. I is a pronoun, right? I can refer to, pronouns refer to a variety of things. That's why we call them pronouns. Pronouns stand for nouns. They stand for other things. The first I am consciousness, that I is the true I, Satchidananda Atma. But the second I, why don't I feel limitless? Does consciousness have feelings? Consciousness has happiness, sadness, good day, bad day, etc. As we've come to understand through Shankara's teachings and the teachings of Advaita Vedanta, teachings of the rishis, consciousness is unchanging. This is a really important Vedantic teaching. The consciousness present in your experience right now is unchanging consciousness. We experience lots of change because our minds are constantly engaged in change, but the consciousness that illumines your changing mental conditions, that consciousness itself is unchanging. So when you say, I am consciousness, that means I am unchanging consciousness. Now, that unchanging consciousness is limitless, as Rishi Ganesh properly says. But now he comes to his question, why don't I feel limitless? That second I cannot be unchanging consciousness. Unchanging consciousness doesn't feel. Look at this. Feelings come and go, right? Quickly. Constantly changing our feelings. So those constantly changing feelings belong to the mind, correct? The feeling of limitlessness belongs to the mind. The feeling of finitude belongs to the mind. For example, right now you feel finite. I am inside this body. I am sitting on this chair. It is a feeling of limitation, a feeling of finitude. That's a normal experience. Suppose you were to meditate very deeply, so much so that your mind becomes perfectly silent. When your mind becomes perfectly silent, that feeling of limitation goes away. Watch this. The feeling of being limited, the feeling of being finite, the feeling of being inside this body, which is sitting on this chair, those feelings go away in deep meditation. Then what remains? This is a little subtle. What remains, of course, is unchanging consciousness. Can you really say that the feeling of limitlessness is present? This is tricky. You gain the feeling of limitlessness. There's a problem here, right? Is limitlessness a feeling? You can have a feeling of expansiveness. For example, if you look up at a dark sky and you see the stars all over, you can feel that kind of sense of breadth and vastness. That's a feeling. But here we're describing a condition when your mind is perfectly silent. When your mind is perfectly silent, by definition, there's no feeling, right? Feelings belong to the mind. So, what we loosely call the feeling of limitlessness is not a feeling, it's the absence of the feeling of limitation. Does that make sense? You get it. You call it feeling of limitlessness, but it's not a feeling. It's the absence of the common feeling of being stuck inside a physical body, sitting on a chair. So, Rishi Ganesh asks, why don't I feel limitless? And feelings are not the goal. Feelings come and go. Feelings belong to the mind. If liberation depends on your mind feeling, this is not exactly his question, but related, a common question, some people wrongly conclude that enlightenment is to achieve a permanent state of feeling limitless. You always feel limitless. This is how some people misunderstand enlightenment. And the problem with that is enlightenment cannot be a feeling. If enlightenment is a feeling, how long do your feelings last? You'll be enlightened for a minute or two, and then that feeling will go away. Enlightenment is not a feeling. Feelings occur in the mind. And the issue here, and he says, I'm feeling stuck. Can you point me in the right direction? So the advice here is to reflect on this problem of identification. The first I am consciousness, I am unchanging consciousness, that I is the true I. But the second I don't feel. Or I do feel, I don't feel. I feel. It's the mind engaged in feeling. So that second I includes identification with the mind. And this is one of the big challenges for every student of Advaita Vedanta, every spiritual seeker. Our identification with the mind is so strong, it's really hard to break that. But continuing to be immersed in these teachings, continuing to meditate on these teachings, eventually you come to realize, and it's understanding, it's knowledge, the knowledge that I am unchanging consciousness, utterly independent of the constantly changing feelings in my mind. I'll say that one more time. I am unchanging consciousness, independent of the constantly changing feelings in my mind. Good, nice question from Rishi Ganesh. Let's see. Okay, I don't understand that question. Try again. Okay, this is a question from Karthik. He lives in India. He asks, how can spirituality reduce the conflict and wars in the world? How can we balance spirituality with daily responsibilities? What are the core values we can develop? And these are ways of expressing what I think is a really important question, and that is, what is the role of our spiritual practice in addressing the terrible problems of the world? And it breaks my heart. Every morning I get my news online. Every morning I see what's happening in Gaza. I see what's happening in Ukraine. It breaks my heart. What to do? How can our spiritual practice help to alleviate this terrible suffering in the world? First of all, as individual beings, as you and me, there's limitations to what we can do. If you come up with a great solution to implement the two-state solution for Israel and the Arabs, if you have the best idea in the world, how to make them adopt it. You may have the magic formula. They haven't figured it out in decades, but you may have the magic formula, but just because you have the solution doesn't mean they can adopt it. What I mean to say is we recognize our limitations as individual people. As an individual person, you can only do so much. But as an individual person, you are part of a bigger entity. In this case, for those of us sitting here, the bigger entity you're part of is the country of the United States. Our many viewers are all over the world. That won't apply. But for our viewers, our students here in New Jersey, we are all part of this country. So as part of this country, you have some effect on the direction this country takes. You exercise your power whenever you cast a vote in this democratic society. So by voting, you can lead this country in a direction which hopefully leads to the lessening of conflict and war in the world. Now, if you ask, what more can we do? That's what we can do. What can you personally do to resolve the conflict in Gaza? As individuals, we're limited. The best we can do. Of course, you can send money to charitable organizations. Absolutely, you can support the caregiving organizations. That let me not neglect that. It's extremely important. You can indeed give financial support to the organizations who are giving support in Gaza and elsewhere. But beyond that, beyond voting and beyond charitable support, there's not much we can do. Now, the last part is, well, how does spiritual sadhana practice come into this picture? And maybe we can say that spiritual practice makes us less interesting. Spiritual practice makes us less needy. Think about it. Yeah, your spiritual practice makes you less needy. When you feel needy, your attention is focused on me. But to the extent that your spiritual practice has removed or reduced the sense of neediness, then you become more open, more aware of other needs, more connected to the problems that are around the world. So in this somewhat indirect way, by reducing your neediness, your spiritual practice makes you more aware of problems in the world. How can Advaita, this is a question from Priyabrata. It's a Bengali name. I'm not sure if he lives in Bengal. How can Advaita help in getting over old traumas? Let me call them emotional wounds. Pain lingers, and stimuli, anything can cause these old emotional wounds can be reopened like a scab on an arm. You scratch the scab and the wound gets reopened. Emotional wounds are like that. How does Advaita help? I'm going to be really blunt. It doesn't. Period. Full stop. Emotional wounds are an emotional problem. Emotional problems require emotional solutions. Come on. If you have a physiological problem, will you go to a psychologist? If you have a psychological problem, will you go to an ENT expert? You get the idea. According to the nature of the problem, you have to seek out an appropriate solution. Advaita Vedanta is a solution to the fundamental problem of suffering. Advaita Vedanta is not a solution for addressing emotional wounds. So, emotional woundedness and all kinds of emotional problems need emotional solutions. The nature of those emotional solutions would depend on you. Some people find great value in seeking therapists. Sometimes just talking to your friends can help. Sometimes there's plenty of self-help books, which, by the way, contain some pretty valuable advice. Don't dismiss them out of hand. There are many well-written self-help books out there. Now, if we change the question slightly, can spiritual practice help you in solving these emotional problems? Absolutely. And especially, I would think, meditation. Whatever problems you face, meditation seems to make those problems easier to handle, easier to manage, easier to solve. Will meditation solve this problem of emotional woundedness? Never. You can't meditate these problems away. They call this spiritual bypassing, when you attempt to push emotional problems away with your spiritual practice, called spiritual bypassing, a huge problem amongst many spiritual seekers. Don't do it. Meditation can help, but not solve that problem of woundedness. An emotional problem requires an emotional solution. Okay, I'm trying to be a little selective here. This is a question from Gopala Krishna, who lives in Vijayawada. That's in Andhra, or now the new state? Andhra Pradesh. So Gopala Krishna asks, precisely what is the factor that makes me forget my true nature as pure consciousness? What makes you forget? Did you forget? Oh, I forgot. You can forget where you left your phone. You can forget where you left your keys. You can't forget who you are. It's not a matter of remembering or forgetting. When you wake up in the morning, do you have to remember who you are? You run to the mirror and say, oh, that's who I am. Silly, right? You don't forget who you are, which is a matter of that self-identity. Self-knowledge is not something you can forget or remember. Also, there's another issue here. Some people, I'm not sure if this is Gopala Krishna's question or not, but some people ascribe to a kind of an odd doctrine. This is less Vedantic and more kind of New Agey kind of teaching, where we have In fact, it borrows a little bit on biblical traditions. We are spiritual beings. This is not Vedanta. This is a New Agey doctrine. We are spiritual beings who have fallen to this earthly condition, having forgotten our true divine natures. This is a popular teaching. It's obviously not a Vedantic teaching, because when you are born, are you born enlightened or ignorant? Right? We are all born ignorant. That's a natural condition. And then through the course of our lives, we have an opportunity to come out of that ignorance. So it's not a matter of remembering. It's a matter of discovery. A quick comment here. So often we use this word knowledge, atmajnanam, self-knowledge, but please don't lose sight of the fact that this is not like any other kind of knowledge. It's not some kind of information. It's not something that you haven't figured out or you haven't read yet. There's nothing that you haven't. There's nothing, to be honest, there's nothing in any scripture reading which you will gain self-knowledge. Well, that's an interesting statement. I'll say it again because it's challenging. If you think that you're not enlightened yet because you're missing out on something in some obscure scripture and you have to find that teaching or find the right guru to tell you the right thing, what do they call it? The missing key? Missing link, right. There's a missing link in your process of knowledge. There's no missing link. The solution is not in a book. The solution is not even the guru. The purpose of the Shastra, scriptures, and purpose of the guru is to guide you in a process of self-inquiry, atma vichara, so that you can personally discover your true nature. So the distinction I'm making is this is not an ordinary kind of knowledge. It's a matter of undergoing a process of self-inquiry guided by the guru, guided by the scriptures, so that you can personally discover your true nature and gain what we call atmajnanam, self-knowledge. It's not a matter of forgetting or remembering. Okay. This is a question from Manjula. She lives in Atlanta, Georgia, in this country. She says that we understand that at the time of pralaya, pralaya means at the end of the cycle of creation, the universe is cyclic according to the ancient rishis. The universe becomes manifest, is manifest for a period of time, and then becomes unmanifest. During pralaya, all life and the entire creation resolves into Ishvara. It becomes unmanifest and it remains non-separate from Ishvara, the God of the cosmos. Then afterwards, what is it that triggers all the individual beings to come and into life again? What triggers the next cycle of creation? Many of you understand this according to the doctrine of karma. It's not so hard to understand. Why are you reborn? Because of your past karmas. Why is the entire universe created? For exactly the same reason. Instead of being the result of one person's karma, it's the result of everyone's collective karma. So according to the doctrine of karma, when this is just an interesting theory, and by the way, when I say theory, we admit doctrine of karma is not a fact, it is a belief, a very helpful belief, a very reasonable logical, well-devised belief, but it is not a truth or fact in the way that Satchidananda Atma is your true nature. These are two different kinds of subject matters. So according to, we'll call it doctrine, according to this doctrine of karma, what is it that brings about the end of a cycle of creation? Well, in that particular cycle of creation, suppose every living being has exactly 1 day's worth of karma left to fructify. Statistically, it is incredibly impossible, but statistically, anything is possible, just not likely. So just imagine every living being has exactly 24 hours before their karmically determined time of death. 24 hours later, all living beings die. Watch this. The reason for the existence of creation is for the fructification of those karmas. When the karmas are finally fructified, there's no reason for this world to exist. This world exists for the sake, this world comes into existence driven by the force of karma for the sake of exhausting all those karmas. When the karmas are exhausted, not only do all living beings die at that same imagined time, in my scenario, but the universe itself. And by the way, when you die, you don't cease to exist, right? You become unmanifest without a physical body. In the same way, when the universe reaches the end of time, it doesn't cease to exist, it becomes unmanifest. They call it bija avastha, a seed condition. And then what is it that makes it manifest again? You become manifest when your other karmas, you physically die when your current karmas are exhausted, but then you have other karmas waiting to be. You have other karmas waiting to be exhausted, which drive you to be incarnated again in the same way. When this universe becomes unmanifest in that seed condition, what is it that causes the seed to sprout? There are many karmas left over from the prior cycle of creation. So the parallel stands. When after you die, you become reborn due to the force of karma from karmas that were not yet fructified in your prior life. In the same way, the universe comes into existence again and again due to the force of karma. So it's quite a nice parallel. Just as you undergo cycles of birth and rebirth, so too for the universe. That's Manjula in Atlanta. Okay. This is a question from Saryugam in Mumbai. The question is it wise to play along and continue living a normal life of ignorance after having realized the true self? Our experience feels like we need to strike a balance between physical and spiritual and continue to live out our pending karmas. Is balance the right approach, or is there a better approach? This idea of balance is attractive to some people because we see the consequences of the lack of balance. So some people You know people who are overly pious and they're always going to the temple, they're always doing pujas at home. There's such a thing as an extremeness in religious activities. There's the other extreme also. Someone who's allergic to religion, never goes into any temple or never does any form of prayer. So these two extremes would be undesirable. Maybe find some middle ground. In the same way, we can say that there are extremes in spiritual life as well, that there are people who are excessive perhaps in their focus on spiritual life, and no doubt there are plenty of people who are, again, allergic to all things spiritual as well as all things religious. So you might think, oh, balance is a good thing. The purpose of Vedanta is to remove human suffering. Do you want a balance of suffering? You have some suffering and then some non-suffering. You want it nicely balanced, so you have the perfect amount of suffering in your life. How absurd is that? So this question is based on confusing vyavahara, daily life, with spiritual truth. In daily life, balance is important. Live a healthy lifestyle is really important. Balance. And just to give a very important example, balance between being awake and being in bed, sleeping. Many people fail to have a proper balance. If you are sleeping 4 hours a day, you probably are not getting a proper balance. Even 5 or 6 hours a day is not enough for many people. You need to balance sleep and waking state. To fail to do so is unhealthy, physically and also psychologically, emotionally. So in day-to-day life, balance is crucial. From the standpoint of spiritual truth, it's not a matter of balance whatsoever. It's a matter of gaining knowledge of your true nature so that you cease to identify with your body and mind and thereby become free from suffering, knowing that the problems of the body belong to the body, problems of your mind belong to the mind, and to you, as pure, unchanging consciousness, there are no problems, no suffering. So again, for Saryuga's question, balance is important in vyavahara, in worldly life, in worldly transactions. It doesn't apply to spiritual truth. I was fortunate enough, this is a question from Rashmi. Rashmi says, I was fortunate enough to receive a diksha, initiation, from one of the greatest spiritual giants of the 20th century. I'm just smiling, imagining who it might be. You can imagine. We're not going to make any conjectures. We have no idea. So Nayana was fortunate enough to receive diksha, spiritual initiation, from one of the greatest spiritual giants of the 20th century. Since then, I've had lots of spiritual experiences. Excellent, wonderful. But when will I get moksha? Excellent question. So look at this. Rashmi, she received diksha. She underwent a number of spiritual experiences and is yet to find full freedom, liberation, enlightenment. Not surprising, right? Because Diksha in and of itself doesn't confer enlightenment. Diksha, by the way, initiation, means to be initiated into certain spiritual practices. There's no guru who can convey enlightenment. What a guru can convey are particular spiritual practices, and usually these are spiritual practices which are a little hidden. They're not part of the public world, so therefore they're received privately and specially from a guru. We call this diksha. So being initiated with a powerful spiritual practice is not enough for moksha, in Rashmi's experience. She has also had a number of other spiritual experiences which did not bring her to enlightenment, moksha. Then what will allow Rashmi to gain moksha? So it's so important to recognize experience and spiritual practice is not enough. Spiritual practice is a means to an end. So, the example given is you can go on cooking for day after day, and you're still hungry. Why? Because cooking doesn't satisfy your hunger. The means is different from the end. In the same way, spiritual practice in and of itself is a means to an end. Also, more importantly, experience. She's had a number of spiritual experiences. The problem with experience is all experiences are temporary, transient. Even the most powerful spiritual experience you can imagine has a beginning and an end, right? So if you become enlightened at the beginning of the spiritual experience, what happens at the end of the experience? Do you lose your enlightenment? The very fact that we use this word enlightenment, and I like that word because it points to the importance of gaining spiritual knowledge. Isn't that what enlightenment means? Enlightenment suggests to gain spiritual knowledge, and a particular kind of knowledge that we've already referred to. When you discover your true nature as pure consciousness, or to use a more general term, when you discover the divinity within you. Let me use this language just to be a little different here. When you discover that divinity within you, look what happens. The guru gives you diksha and says you do this particular spiritual practice, and then you do the spiritual practice. You have a number of experiences that come and go. There will be no enlightenment until and unless you discover personally that inner divinity, your true nature as Satchidananda Atma. Spiritual practice helps you make that discovery. The instructions of a guru help you make that discovery. But be very clear, no guru can make you discover anything. You have to discover, right? No one can make you see, you have to see. Again, it's a matter of personal discovery, as we've seen before. This is a question from Stephen, who asks, hypothetically, if a person has the experience of mindless bliss, but does not fully incorporate it, is it useless? Maybe, maybe not. So, in meditation, you can experience, he calls it mindless bliss. When your mind is perfectly silent, we often call it samadhi. Little tricky. And Patanjali actually identifies 7 different kinds of samadhi. We don't want to go into that detail right now, so we'll just leave it as samadhi. So suppose you experience samadhi. And he asks, if you fail to incorporate it in your day-to-day life, is it useless? What does it mean to incorporate the blissful experience of samadhi into your day-to-day life? This idea of incorporating a spiritual experience into your day-to-day life, there's something off in that perspective or the assumption. The assumption is that spiritual experiences are applicable to day-to-day life. Is that necessarily a correct assumption? Are spiritual experiences directly applicable to day-to-day life? I would say spiritual wisdom is directly applicable. But we're not talking about wisdom. We're talking about the experience of bliss in samadhi. Are spiritual experiences directly applicable to day-to-day life? I think it's an unrealistic expectation. It's a wrong assumption. Also, from the standpoint of Advaita Vedanta, this mindless bliss of samadhi is not the goal. In the school of yoga means there's a particular philosophical teaching about Ashtanga yoga. This is the teaching of the great Rishi Patanjali. And in his system of meditation, of spirituality, he has samadhi as the goal. Advaita Vedanta rejects that samadhi as a goal. Now, why would Advaita Vedanta reject samadhi as being the goal? Most of you can answer that based on our prior discussion. How long does samadhi last? Has a beginning and has an end. Do you want to be free? During samadhi, do you suffer? Wonderful. You're free from suffering. But then after samadhi comes to an end, suffering resumes. So for this reason, the focus of Advaita Vedanta is not samadhi. Samadhi is useful, absolutely useful. It's just not the goal, and therefore not applicable really to daily life. Okay. Some questions are actually too elaborate and complex. Okay. Questions about Buddhism I may set aside. This is a question that comes up again and again. There are so many questions about this doctrine of karma. And at some point in our satsangs, I will start setting aside questions on the doctrine of karma because there are too many questions about that. And by the way, knowing the doctrine of karma, does it make you enlightened? Okay. But anyway, this is a commonly asked question. This question comes Arudha. So Arudha asked, I see the population everywhere constantly increasing. The population of this planet has reached 7 billion. By the way, that population curve is already flattening out and will eventually be flat or decrease. Don't think it just continues forever. Biological, what is it? A colony of bacteria limit the number of bacteria by the size of they can only grow so much. Any population is limited by some genetics and all of that. So we are a colony of 7 billion human beings who populate this country, eventually the size of that colony will flatten off and be limited. But in the meanwhile, it's still increasing. So my question is every individual has a true self, parentheses, soul. So are there an infinite number of true selves, parentheses, soul? Excuse me, sorry for the noise. Notice that I don't use the word soul because my guru didn't use the word soul. Why didn't he use the word soul? In fact, he talked about this, and he said the word soul is a confusing term. It means different things to different people, so for this reason, it's unhelpful to use the word soul. He uses also the word true self. So why don't we replace these words with Sanskrit terminology that's precise? And this is what I received from my guru, is the use of precise terminology. Turns out a lot of our confusion in our spiritual practice, a lot of confusion is due to our imprecise use of language. Well, that's an easy problem to address. Many other problems are not so easy to address. This one is, what do they call it? Low-hanging fruit. So this is an easy one to address. Let's address it. Let's use precise language. We have a word, Atma. Atma means the true self. So instead of, if you say true self, then there's a false self? There is, but that's a confusing kind of terminology. So instead of using true self, then just say Atma. Your essential nature as pure consciousness. Unborn, uncreated, unchanging. Satchidananda, that is Atma. We'll call it Atma. Or this is my guru's joke. Or if you speak with an American accent, Atma. Atma. All right, Atma. Then he uses the word soul. For some people, soul means Atma, but for many other people, it doesn't. For example, when I was raised in a Christian faith, where I was told, when I die, my soul will go to heaven or not. It'll go to the other place. And even as a child, I used to wonder, okay, when I die, my soul goes to heaven or hell, but what happens to me? Even as a child, that was an obvious question. I have a soul, it goes to heaven or hell, what happens to me? Already that suggests that something called soul, very indistinctly, is different from me. Atma. And indeed, we, in the teachings of Advaita Vedanta, we make a very clear distinction between Atma, your essential nature as pure consciousness, and what we call Sukshma Sharira, the entity that travels from one body to the next, driven by the force of karma at the end of one's life. Some people will call it transmigrating entity. Not that, at least is more look at the comparison between soul and transmigrating entity. The latter has a lot more clarity, but then in Sanskrit we use the expression sukshma sharira, the subtle body. This is the stula sharira, physical body. It is enlivened and inhabited by the sukshma sharira. If there were no sukshma sharira inhabiting this body would be dead. Because a sukshma sharira abides in this body, it is alive. And will continue to be alive as long as sukshma sharira abides. Now, with this definition, it's absolutely clear that Atma and Sukshma Sharira are two completely different topics. Atma is your true nature as pure consciousness. Sukshma Sharira is that which abides in your body and makes you alive. It includes the prana, your life force. It includes your powers of sensation, sight, hearing, taste, smell, and touch. It includes all your mental faculties. All of these collectively are called Sukshma Sharira. Now, we can come back to his question. How many? That was his question. Is there constantly increasing population? We're up to 7 billion. So how many, and now I'll change the language, I'll use our Vedantic language. If there are 7 billion people today living, how many Atmas are there and how many Sukshma Shariras are there? So let's examine this question from the standpoint of Advaita Vedanta. First one you already know the answer to. Atma is the inner divinity which is non-separate from Ishvara. In Bhagavad Gita, Krishna says again and again and again and again, I am the Atma that dwells in all. How many Krishnas are there? How many Atmas are there? So, fine. There is, we understand clearly, there is one Atma. And since that one Atma is formless, limitless, all-pervasive, that one Atma is simultaneously present in all beings. One Atma, simultaneously present in all beings. Then, how many Sukshma Shariras are there? 7 billion? Well, wait a minute. What about dogs and cats? They're living beings. What about cockroaches? Sorry to use that example. Theoretically, and again, this is part of the doctrine of karma. This is not a matter of truth. This is a matter of belief. It's a very sophisticated teaching, doctrine. According to the doctrine of karma, every living thing is enlivened by the presence of a sukshma sharira. Are trees and plants living things? So we presume that even trees and plants have a sukshma sharira. Then, are there 7 billion of them? Well, 7 billion is just human beings. What about all these other life forms? And then just for fun, what about life forms on distant planets? We don't know. It certainly is possible, right? Okay, a couple more. And we're going to make the satsang a little bit longer because there, Any problem? Oh, thank you. Yeah, let's take this one. This is from our students here in New Jersey. We're studying Uddhava Gita here, and many of you are also watching those Uddhava Gita classes. They're posted every week online. And so in Uddhava Gita, it said that Vidya, that Atma Vidya is different from all other kinds of knowledge. This knowledge frees you from suffering. You then said that this knowledge can be better understood as discovery of your true nature. And that's a nice expression, discovery of your true nature, because the word knowledge often means information. When we talk of Atma Vidya, we're not talking about information about Atma. Atma equals Satchidananda is information. My true nature is pure, unchanging consciousness. That's not information. That's self-discovery. Okay. the question goes on, intuitively you know that the true source of happiness lies within. What do you mean by the word intuitively? I'm not sure I used the word intuitively. And I try not to, because it's another fuzzy word like soul. What does intuition mean? Usually we use intuition to mean some kind of knowledge that is not arrived at logically. Something you don't have to figure it out. There's no sequence. It's just discovered. So you know that the true source of happiness lies within intuitively. What does that mean, intuitively? Instead of intuitively, I would say experientially and logically. Look at this. How do we know the true source of contentment lies within? How do we know? Shruti, Yukti, Anubhava. All three. Vedanta is based on Shruti, scripture, Yukti, reasoning, and Anubhava, experience. So if you say, how do we know that the true source of contentment lies within? We should be able to establish it in all three ways. That's how Vedanta works. Vedanta is scriptural revelation supported by reasoning and personally confirmed through experience. We call this Shruti, scripture, Yukti, reasoning, and Anubhava, experience. So it's apply it to the true source of contentment lies within. When the rishis said Atma is Satchit Ananda, what does that word Ananda mean? True source of contentment and peace. Where is that true source of contentment and peace? It's the nature of Atma, your true self. So here is the first one. Shruti, scripture reveals that your true nature as pure consciousness which is Atma, is indeed the true source of contentment and peace and happiness within you. Then Yukti, reasoning. When you eat ice cream or your favorite food, whatever it is, you become happy. Is happiness an ingredient in the ice cream? Look at the label. Happiness is not an ingredient in the ice cream, yet you become happy when you eat the ice cream. Obviously, the happiness is not coming from the ice cream, then where could it possibly come from? Yukti. This is the use of reasoning to establish the true inner source of contentment and peace. Finally, Anubhava. When you meditate, I presume that you all meditate, and if you don't, you're missing out on something so important, really. Anyway, suppose you meditate and your mind becomes quiet. You're not getting, how do you feel in meditation when your mind becomes quiet? Feel happy, content, wonderful. Is that happiness coming from outside? Your eyes are closed, your mind is quiet. That happiness cannot possibly come from outside, so your own experience also confirms that the true source of contentment, peace, happiness lies within. So we would, if I use the word intuition, I actually apologize. I don't like to use that word. If I said it, I misspoke. We know the true source of contentment and happiness to be within, not due to, and just because intuition is a fuzzy word, let's not use it. Instead, how do we know the true source of contentment lies within? Shruti, Yukti, Anubhava. Scriptural revelation, supported by reasoning, and finally confirmed through your own experience. Okay. Okay, we got most of the questions, not quite all, but we did better than in the last class. This is a good place to conclude for today. A couple of announcements to make at the end here. Yeah. Next Sunday is Christmas Eve, and the following Sunday is New Year's Eve. Those are probably not good times for question and answer sessions. Many people have social engagements and so forth. So we will not have the satsang the next 2 weeks. When we resume, I think it is January 7th, I think is the first Sunday next year, we are going to shift the time of the satsang. Currently, we're holding it at 11 a.m. here in New Jersey, which I think is 4 p.m. in London and 9:30 p.m. in India. We're going to shift 1 hour earlier to make it a little bit easier. So next Sunday, the first Sunday in January, the satsang will be again live streamed at 10 o'clock in the morning in Eastern time, which should be, I think, 3 p.m. in London and 8:30 p.m. in India. So please join us at that time, and we'll conclude today with a prayer. Om Sarve Bhavantu Sukhinaha Sarve Santu Niramayaha Sarve Bhadrani Pashyantu Ma Kaschad Dukkha Bhag Bhavet Asato Ma Sadgamaya Tamaso Ma Jyotirgamaya Mrityorma Amritangamaya. Om Shanti 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 Om Tat Sat. See you next time.